The Unknown Country. This is a film you may not have heard of. That's okay. A lot of films like that. But this one you also might have heard of if you follow film circles because Lily Gladstone won Best Lead Performance at the Gotham Awards for this. And it's also nominated at the Independent Spirit Awards, of which I am a voting member. So I'm watching The Unknown Country. It does not have audio description, but I'm going to try to change some minds, and we're going to talk to independent filmmakers about audio description. So this is my next journey of my life. The Unknown Country, I actually rented before I joined the Independent Spirit, and so I rented it off of iTunes. It's available on iTunes if you want to watch it, and it doesn't have audio description. I don't know if it does anywhere, but it doesn't here. And this was a tough watch. What I gathered is that there was a young woman who had to go on a journey of some kind to a funeral and met some people along the way. And it's very independent in so much that it doesn't really follow a typical structure. This is sort of where artists go to grow, and I'm sure this film has a lot of really beautiful shots in it. It has very little dialogue, not quite as much as one of these films that we've had recently where they like stylistically are choosing to not have dialogue, like John Woo's Silent Night, or no one will save you, or no one can save you, or whatever. Not like that. I mean, it just doesn't have a lot of dialogue. It just has a lot of like quiet pondering. And there are times actually where, at least at the beginning of the film, due to lack of audio description and sort of understanding what was happening, there were times where people seemed like they were talking directly to a camera, like they were being interviewed. And I was like, am I watching a documentary? But then I didn't feel like I was watching a documentary. And I know I'm not watching a documentary because of the way the film was nominated at the Spirit Awards. And Lily Gladstone, I noticed, was also credited as a writer on this film. The film definitely is one that I would love for it to have audio description on, because it seems to be a story that celebrates the diversity by including indigenous population storylines. So much like we see growing interest in this thing with shows like Reservation Dogs, where they focus on an indigenous population and their story and what their lives are like. This show focuses on that as well, with Lily being the central focus character in this story. And I think to myself, me as a blind individual, and all the other blind individuals that I interact with daily, with the lack of audio description, when we run into things, oftentimes it's just a bunch of gatekeeping. It's telling us that these titles are not for us. You can go watch these titles, but only when they're on these streaming services, because the audio description won't travel. It's a whole big thing. But with this film, I think about how when we talk about representation matters, does it matter all the way, or does it matter to a certain point? Because I mean, it would be amazing if there were no blind indigenous people. That would be some sort of like genetically, some genetic oddity that we should study, and maybe, that'll find like the ability to reverse blindness or prevent blindness or something. Be like, wow, did you know that the native populations of America do not have any blind people? I did not know that. We should figure that one out and figure out why that is. But I feel like they probably do. And I'm sure those people are interested in watching stories featuring people who look like them. Much like we talk about how important it is for every other ethnicity or race or culture to see themselves represented in a certain way by people who look like them. And this is an opportunity. There are so few of them that for a film like this to lack audio description when it has so little to go off of in terms of being able to offer you context through dialogue, that I worry that an indigenous population is not going to be able to enjoy a film that was made with them in mind. And it's not like I don't want to assume that, you know, all indigenous people like live on reservations where nobody watches TV or movies. Like, that's ridiculous. So I assume that there are indigenous people who love film, and I'm sure they want their voices to be heard as well. So to assume that there are no blind people who love film and television who are indigenous is probably a fallacy. So we're going with that. So, you know, when you want to talk about giving people voices and making those voices heard, you really only are talking about it within the context of how your normative life extends. You know, how you as a sighted director, producer, writer, actor, whatever, see the world to you, accessibility wise. You don't think about accessibility. I know this because I used to be able to see. For 6 years, I would just walk around and I was like, anything I can do, I can just do it. I can hop in my car, I can go anywhere, I can pick up a book and read it whenever I want, read a magazine, I can go to any movie I want, and sit there in front of it. Doesn't even matter. I can have subtitles. It can be a completely different language. You know, I mean, the freedom. And if you are not impacted by people with disabilities in your life, then you wouldn't necessarily think of stuff like this. So I'm willing to have a conversation, but unfortunately in this case, there's nothing here for me to go off of. There's very little. There are only a couple little scenes of dialogue for me to grasp anything at, and it'd be really hard for me to vote for this as it stands against something else that perhaps does have audio description. For example, at the Spirit Awards, I've had the opportunity to watch Past Lives, which does have audio description. Thank God, because half the movie is in Korean. So, and that was a film that offered the opportunity for everybody to sort of partake in that viewing experience. So we all felt included, instead of this film, which feels like some people are excluded. And I realize that sometimes with distributors that it can be sort of a gamble. This film is listed as having a distributor called Music Box, which I honestly don't know what that is. But at least it has distribution. There's so many films that are looking for distribution, and it luckily landed Lily Gladstone. I kind of wonder if anybody would have noticed this film if Lily Gladstone wasn't blowing up this year with Killers of the Flower Moon, but that's another thing. And I just think that when you have an opportunity to tell a story, you should try to tell it to everybody. Last year, I watched a film called A Love Song, starring Dale Dickey and Wes Studi, also an indigenous actor. And that film had audio description, and it was, I'm fairly certain, nominated at Independent Spirit Awards or Gotham Awards. One of the independent picked it up. And when I watched the film, it had audio description. And it didn't come from a major distributor. It just happened to have audio description because somebody thought it was important enough to put audio description in the film. It's all about what you choose and how you choose importance-wise. Last year, I helped an Oscar-nominated short animated short, I should have said those words in the right order, find audio description, even though they didn't really have distribution. They kind of popped up on Hulu because they got nominated, and they were there for like a month right around the Oscars, and then they kind of disappeared. But they did make themselves available on Vimeo with audio description once I had a conversation with the filmmakers, and they understood why they needed it and what it was, and they got really excited about the idea of providing accessibility. Why am I saying all this? Well, because I think the only people that are going to click on this review for The Unknown Country are people who are interested in it and my opinion, and I can't have one because this film is unwatchable. as it is for me, which is the sad truth. And I use that, it's a harsh word, unwatchable. It's the kind of dangerous word that we hear, when we think of like a really bad film and we're like, oh, that film is unwatchable. Plan 9 from outer space, But I use it because something's got to change. There are too many films out there that don't have audio description. There are too many TV shows that don't have audio description. And they're really hard to follow. This is coming from somebody who has a film degree, who has been watching films his entire life. I've got like 800 DVDs and I subscribe to every single major streaming service, and I'm constantly watching TV and film every day. And I still find films like this to be narratively like impossible to follow. And on top of that, oftentimes directors use things visually that have nothing to do with what's happening in the dialogue that we may miss out on, that are important to the overall structure of the story. So in cases like that, audio description is also important. So this is just a big lesson to independent filmmakers out there. If you're watching this video, please consider adding audio description to your films. Blind people do go to film festivals. I have other friends who have been to other film festivals. I just had a friend who was at Toronto this year and was dismayed at several films that did not have audio description, including American Fiction, which premiered at Toronto without audio description. I don't know why, but I'm going to call that film out. And we're just, we're real. We're here and we watch films, and there are millions of Americans who are blind or visually impaired and require a level of accessibility, and it would be nice if we had it. So unfortunately, this is no, I'm not trying to say anything about this film or the filmmaker or indigenous populations, but this film is unwatchable. That's the grade I have to give it. So I guess the argument could be that I could not review films like this, but then again, that's kind of what the world wants. The world kind of just wants me to shut up and put my head down and just not say anything about films that don't have audio description. And that's not going to change anything. You know that, right? You know that me deciding to not say anything and not review these films would not change anything. Somebody asked me, why do I review films? Why do I even bother? Why do I pay? Why do I do it? Why do I do this to myself? Because I have to have this conversation. If I don't, the people who are in charge are never going to naturally make the choice to dive in on accessibility. We have to start having these conversations. So I have it this way. Sorry to this film, but that's just the harsh truth. If you add audio description, please reach out to me and let me know, and I would love to rewatch the film. I'm open to that with any film that I've reviewed. I'll rewatch it if I find out it's got audio description. If somebody asks me to, I'll rewatch it. So anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Please click subscribe because it's important for voices like mine to be amplified. I'm not trying to become famous or make $1 million, but I need to talk about audio description in front of as many people as humanly possible. You can go to my website, macthemovieguy.com. You can go to the audio description project, adp.acb.org. It'll let you know what does have audio description and where you can watch it. And you can go to the ADNA.org. That's the ADNA.org. It'll let you know who's narrating your favorite films and television series. That's it for me today. I will watch something else, may or may not have audio description, and I'll see you guys on the other side.